into free will and I follow it back, it of course cannot exist, because then there would have to be an individual self making choices, so it just dissolves. But then in my mental mind, there's still this thing of like, well, who is it that chooses to follow a thought or not follow a thought, to rest in presence? Or, do you understand what I'm kind of going towards? Like, there's something that still needs to be ironed out, let's say, in terms of this thinking that I choose to expand or, yeah.
I think a way to directly see that our free will as a separate entity is an illusion is to ask ourselves a question: do I choose my thoughts? Or do they come to me without asking for permission? So what is your experience?
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. The kind of slight discrepancy, let's say, would be in, for example, just in meditation, in day-to-day life, I notice a thought rise, which, yes, I had no choice in bringing in.
We don't choose them any more than we choose the weather.
Yes, I agree with you. But there seems to be a choice of, should I follow this thought? Like, it might be a delicious thought that I want to follow, but I'm like, no, I'm going to be present and not follow it. So there does seem to be a choice.
But that's thought number 2. Do you choose thought number 2 any more than you choose thought number 1?
Yeah, okay. It feels still sometimes.
I don't care what it feels.
Yeah.
You know, because that feeling is not very reliable. You know, oh, I feel that this guy is in love with me. Perhaps, yes. But sometimes you may be mistaken by feelings.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay.
If you'll be so kind, could you describe if whatever shift you went through to where you may have been in your life to where you are now took place suddenly, or did it happen over, a short period of time? I have two questions.
I think there might be a little bit of both. There might be a succession of shifts that are very important. And what happened in this specific case cannot necessarily be transposed to it. Each truth seeker has his or her own trajectory, you see. So I don't want to. In my case, in this case of this apparent Francis, there was a first understanding that was triggered by reading Krishnamurti's books. And what he made me understand is that that the psychological issues I had, at the time I was young, so I had psychological, that the psychological issues I had, all of them, including the ones I didn't have yet, but I could potentially have, had one common cause. And that to try to address these individual issues one by one was kind of a waste of time and energy, that I better go to the central root cause of those. And that put me on the, something in me said, yes, there is I felt there was an element of truth in that. And I became very interested in Krishnamurti's writings, and then that led to Advaita, Zen, Buddhism, and other readings. And then I learned about, the path. But then I wanted to meet someone, because it remained very, very hypothetical to me. I wanted to meet someone to see how they lived. At the time, there was no internet. I had no way to connect with Krishnamurti. So I was seeking a teacher for that very reason, to see how he or she would live. And I met Jean Klein, who became my teacher. And shortly after meeting him, perhaps 2 weeks after my first meeting, I had an experience that revealed, if you will, the eternity and the splendor of our true nature. But in hindsight, that's one path. It's not the only one. After that, I still had problems. I still had issues. By the way, 2 years thereafter, I noticed that the psychological issues I had before that had triggered my search in a sense, had kind of vanished. I was shy when I was with people. And I didn't feel comfortable. And I noticed that this problem had disappeared without doing anything to that end, so that the understanding I had that was revealed to me by Krishnamurti was true. That if you address the root cause of those individual psychological issues, then they will disappear by themselves. Then I think something also important that came with through the conversation I had with Jean Klein was the discrimination between consciousness and mind. Even after this revelation, a revelation is beautiful because you know your eternity, in a sense, your reality. But somehow you may lose the path to it. In other words, you may feel, yes, I was there. It's like someone who lives in a miserable place in the cities, and he gets hijacked, blindfolded, and taken back and taken to Shangri-La, and then he enjoys everything beautiful, but then he's blindfolded again and finds himself in this lousy place. And because he was blindfolded, there is no way he can go to where he wants to go. So up until that moment, in spite of this revelation, I had the wrong intellectual concept. In that sense that I was not making the distinction between consciousness and thought. I was putting them in the same, that's whatever is taking up there upstairs, So all of that belongs to the thing. And at the same time, I was also kind of not giving it its true value, to consciousness, because thought, as I mentioned earlier on, was something that I was not really interested in. I had been in close connection with thought for a long time during my studies. And I knew the shortcomings of it, or the limitations of it. But unfortunately, I was superimposing onto consciousness the limitations I was superimposing onto thought. So he made me understand the distinction. He used to say, for instance, thought doesn't think. That which thinks the thought is of a different nature than the thought itself. The reality that creates a thought is not a thought. The thought of an apple doesn't create the thought of a computer. In other words, a thought doesn't think another thought. They don't belong to the same drawer, to the same category. That was very important, because it's important to have the proper intellectual perspective, because then it's like a compass. If you want to go somewhere, you need the momentum, you need the energy, and you need the direction. You see, one without the other is not sufficient. You need both. So this understanding, this discrimination between consciousness and the objects of consciousness was a very important moment in my life trajectory.
Since you've made this shift, is there any fundamental change in the way you experience a deep sleep, deep dream sleep?
Yes.
There is?
Yes. And actually, I had heard that such a thing could happen. And I met my teacher in 1975. And I remember one day I was staying at his place. It was perhaps 2 years thereafter or 3 years thereafter, so 1977. I asked him this very question. Apparently, if we have a glimpse of our true nature, the quality, we don't sleep any longer. The quality of sleep, we don't sleep any longer. And my teacher said, he had this mysterious answer. He said, yes, it's like when you go down into a basement, degree by degree. I didn't make much of this answer. Several years later, as I was falling asleep, I was witnessing my bodily sensations, and going into, they disappeared, into presence. I was familiar with it. And then I could see the element of the dream arising out of this presence. There was a complete continuity of awareness. And then the thought came, yes, that's it. But then I realized that this experience didn't start at that moment. It had been going on for a long time, many years before. Then I understood the degree by degree. So it's just that the mind doesn't realize, doesn't formulate the experience, doesn't. There are two different things. One thing is experiencing, and the other thing is for the mind to acknowledge this experience. So when it's like, for instance, to give you an analogy, let's say you have a headache. Then you take some Advil. And then 1 hour after, you realize, oh, the headache has disappeared. So you know it has disappeared between these two moments. The moment when you realize it has disappeared and the moment you took the Advil. But you don't know when. You see? And you know, it didn't disappear when I realized it had disappeared, right? It has disappeared a long time before. So same thing with this experience of not falling asleep. The body falls asleep, but consciousness is aware throughout. I cannot say when it started. It never started. It was always like that, in fact. When you go to the other side, it has always been like that.
Thank you. Thanks for the answer. I have tons of other questions, but I think I better pass this.
Hello, Francis. I have a question about how does the finite arises from infinite consciousness? Like our thoughts and perceptions are finite. How can something finite emerge of something infinite? If it comes from the infinite, it must have some qualities of the infinite, so it's not truly finite.
The objection is making the assumption that that which arises and that out of which that which arises are on the same level of reality. You see, then the objection would make sense. It would be a real objection. But that which arises is not on the same level of reality. It's simply an appearance. So, as its true nature is the reality, so its true nature, the true nature of the apparently finite appearance is infinite. So it's only if you grant reality to the impermanent appearance, then you say, okay, how could not it possibly be infinite, since it arises out of the infinite? But when you understand that the true nature of the finite is the infinite, then...
So the true nature of finite is infinite because the thought support is awareness, right? So awareness.
Right. If you want, not only the support, but that which it is made of. You see, a thought arises in awareness. Of course, during the presence of the thought, there is awareness. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have a thought. Before the thought arises, there is awareness. And after the thought, there is still awareness. So the substance, the true nature of the thought is awareness. With another way to put it is that without awareness, you don't have a thought. Without a thought, you can have awareness. You can have awareness of a different thought. You can have awareness of a sensation. Or you can have awareness of awareness.
And so why is there rules to the appearance of these
Why?
sensations?
Why what?
Why is there rules to the, like for instance, I can't see through your eyes, you can't see through my eyes. So there's rules to the appearance of perception and thoughts.
When I asked this question for my teacher, I asked him, how comes I am not aware of your thoughts as we are having this conversation? He said, how do you know you are not aware of it and you are not forgetting? Now, another objection to that is, yes, but I should be aware simultaneously of your thoughts. And I cannot be at the same time aware and not aware. Well, think about your night dream. Think about an event in your night dream that comes to you as a big surprise, like you are smoking pots and the cops are all of a sudden, crashing through your door. You see, so you are surprised, right? You are afraid. All of a sudden, you see the SWAT team with weapons. But in fact, who created the police invading your castle? You did. So both you were creating it and you were not aware of it, right? Right? You would agree with that, right? So that's an example of within the parameters of a simple human mind. Shows that it is possible to, at the same time, in a sense, create and not be aware of that which you are creating. So what is possible within the parameters of a limited human mind? Why would you deny the universal consciousness this ability? And that's what makes the game possible. I mean, can you imagine if we would know what everything thinks at the same time? How boring it would be. And also what a mess it would be. But also, if we would know, talking about the fact that we are creating everything, right? If we would know ahead of time everything we are creating, I mean, life wouldn't be worth living because we would know everything. It would be so boring. You see what I mean? In order to enjoy the surprise, we need to forget that we are creating. That's why human minds are, in fact, tools of enjoyment or celebration.
Could you share about vision and goals, where those life reveals itself?
About what?
Vision and goals in life, where those life reveals itself.
Could you elaborate? Because
even during the weekend, there was a lot of who are you as human in the world and what are your goals, what are your visions? And versus, so my question...
I'm afraid you are addressing the wrong... I'm not an expert on vision and goals.
So what is your take on it? Like, do you have
Should I have a take?
No, but I would like to hear how is it for you life reveals itself. You're just from one moment to the next moment and let it arise. There's not a mental vision, I want to write a book or,
I don't like writing, so I don't have this vision. But if I want to do something, I do it. I mean, I'm a normal guy.
So it sounds, it arises in you and then you follow it. But
Yeah. Like everybody else. What? And I guess like everybody else, I don't like to do things I don't like to do. That's a koan. If you ask me about the goal of life, I think the goal of life is life itself. And the goal of life is celebration, enjoying life. We all enjoy life, even if we claim we don't. Like people who complain all the time, They enjoy complaining. They enjoy complaining. This story in this restaurant, and there are the three old ladies, they meet there every Thursday for lunch. And the waiter, he knows them, and they always complain that something. And so at the end of the meal, the waiter comes when he comes with a tab, and he says, "Anything all right, ladies?" This one didn't fly. "Anything all right?" It's late. Late in the week.
The Alitalia joke was a good one.
What?
The Alitalia joke was a good one.
I like this one too.
Hi, Francis. My interest is in understanding a little bit more about how an apparently separate self can change or does appear to change. I'm aware of your metaphor about the vending machine and you put the money in and a Coke is going to come out. But perhaps as a result of me asking you this question and hearing the answer, maybe a Sprite will come out. And how does that happen?
That which is impermanent changes. For instance, understanding brings about change. When my teacher went to India and met his guru, after he was in his 40s, my teacher, and after 6 months, he realized that he has changed more over the previous 6 months than during all of his adult life before that. And then he said, I must have met a real guru, so that to bring about such a tremendous change in all the compartment of my life. So yes, the truth is a very potent element of change. When I go to my hometown or I see, it happens early, friends that used to be my friends in college, and it's amazing how little they have changed. I see them as adults, as old people now, and I see the same kids with the same, and so I feel I have changed so much, and that's because it's like something, the understanding of our true nature sets in motion a process. It's like something was frozen, and all of a sudden the ice starts melting and moving, and that which was set becomes more flexible, more that which was opposition or becomes complementarity, or even becomes unity. You see, belief systems we had lose their grip on us. We are not attached to opinions.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. My question is, how do you live in the true heart, and how do you extrapolate this for everybody?
It is natural for us to live in the true heart. That's our real place. So all we have to do is to stop living in a different place or from a different place. And every time we believe or we feel to be a limited entity, to be something limited, we are in the wrong place. So we can, every time we catch ourselves red-handed, so to speak, living from the wrong place, from the perspective of being a human body-mind, of being a limited consciousness, to try as an experiment, to say, what if that were not true? For instance, I'm talking to you, right? What if it were not true? What if we were the same? You know, like we are, what if we were, you know, like we have two hands in the body, right? And they are part of the same body. And what if these two bodies talking to each other were like two hands of a universal body, you know, facing each other? Then the quality of the relationship will be different. You know, you don't beat your hand. The right hand doesn't want to beat the left hand and to do harm to the left hand any more than the left hand wants to do harm to the right hand. They take good care of each other. See what I mean? Why? Because they belong to the same entity. So here we are like all the eyes, all the ears, all the hands and limbs, and are the eyes of God, of the universe, you know, and the hands of the universe. If we had this vision, this perspective in our relationship, the world would be in a different place, right? So, but we cannot change the world. The world is fine the way it is. But we can, in our own interactions with others and with the events in our life, come from this different perspective. And you'll see that if we are friendly to the universe is friendly to us. You see? And
I remember your words last year. You told me, if you love life
yeah, that's the
loves.
same. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Hi. One of my first experiences as a child, I remember very vividly. It's the question that suddenly appeared: why am I in this particular body and not in the body of this other person, of this other child. And whatever arises, awareness and thoughts and experiences, is still somehow related to the particular body we are in. So you touched about the mind, but we're still in a separate entities somehow. Why in this one? Why not in somebody else's? So is it just our limited perception? Maybe there are thousands of universes, and in other ones, I am in a different body, so to speak.
Yeah. I think you left unchallenged an assumption in your question. The assumption is, I am in this body. How do you know? You know, to make the statement that the water is in the glass, I need two things. I need to see the glass, and I need to see the water, and I need to see the water in the glass, right? Then I can make the statement, the water is in the glass. Okay. Now, you make the statement, I am in the body, right? The body is the glass, right? What is in the glass? Can you see it? And can you see you in the glass of the body? You're the water.
But even if the body is in it, so I didn't phrase it correctly, there is still the experience of the awareness still somehow in my life connected through these particular eyes.
Well, what you see through these eyes is connected to these eyes. What you memorize through this brain is connected to this brain. That doesn't make you limited by what you perceive. You know, you are making a second assumption here, which is this, that which perceives is limited somehow by what it perceives, by that which it perceives. In other words, there is no problem that the body is limited and that the mind is limited. Where I see a problem is when we extend the limitation of the body and of the mind to the realities that perceives them. In fact, if we investigate a little more this, we can ask the question, to which extent can the knowledge of what we perceive give us information about the reality that perceives it? You know, can, for instance, pictures taken through a microscope of bacteria by a biologist give us information about the length of the hair of the biologist? That's an interesting question. Why is it that we attribute the limitation of that which is observed to that which observes? Does the fact that the biologist observes bacteria, does that make it a bacteria? We have no right to do that, and we do that all the time. But there is a fallacy in this way of reasoning. So we have to admit the possibility, in spite of the fact that that which is perceived by consciousness through a body-mind is limited, that consciousness nevertheless can be unlimited. I'm not saying that I am proving it. I'm just opening the door to a new possibility. Now, this new possibility has to be experimentally verified or falsified, but that's a different issue. You see, and the way to verify or falsify it experientially is the suggestion I made to change our decisions, the way we think, the way we decide, the way we interact with others, the way we perceive, the way we feel, to bring it into compliance with the possibilities that consciousness is universal, that consciousness is real first, and then that there is only one reality. You see, because if we think about it, everything we are experiencing here in this room could be a dream. Because when we dream, we are not aware that it is a dream, right? So, but even if it were, there is something which is beyond the shadow of a doubt, which is real. It is the consciousnessing aspect, right? You see what I mean? Which points to the fact that consciousness belongs to a level of reality which is superior to that which it perceives, because of this 100% certainty we have of consciousness, whereas the certainty of what is perceived is less certain. Whereas in the common view of the world, most people in our culture, they do just the opposite. They see that which is perceived, especially that which is made of matter, as real. The glass, the table, the bottle, the water. And the consciousness that perceives it, as I said earlier, they inadvertently put it in the same drawer where thoughts are put, not important, not as real as that which is tangible. So we have to understand that a reversal of the hierarchy of realities can be done. That consciousness is real. And then we have this natural intuition that there is only one reality, non-duality, but only one reality. And then everything falls into place. If consciousness is real, if consciousness is a reality which is here in these worlds right now, and if there is only one reality, then consciousness is this reality. And a consequence of that, a corollary of that, is that we all share the same consciousness. And that is love. The recognition that we all share the same consciousness is the experience of love.
I was actually going to ask about love, because you talk about maybe the meaning of human life is to celebrate and enjoy. So that is, I was thinking, that celebration and enjoyment is, to be shared with everyone, with people. and that's love, sharing that.
Yeah,
together.
because enjoyment which is not shared is not as enjoyable, right?
Right.
It's better to share a glass of champagne with a friend than to drink a bottle of champagne alone. That's a French metaphor, but
And then, so how do you said you still had some stuff in you that you worked on after you had your awareness, falling into awareness, or so do you, like, let's say it's shadow, whatever shadow size you have, what do you do, any practical advice to deal with these shadow sides that will probably always show up more or less, and are they actually shadows?
yes, the residues of ignorance of the years we have spent believing and feeling that we were separate entities, they are imprinted in the body and in the mind, and both levels, and they survive, although they are they have become, they have lost their foundation, so to speak. They survive a little while. The metaphor I use is when in cartoons, when you see the little Speedy Gonzales or whatever being pursued by, and there is this plateau, and then there is this abyss here, and so he's in, and then all of a sudden he's, and poof. You see what I mean? So the residues of ignorance, once the glimpse of our true nature has taken place, have lost their foundation. They are in this situation. In India, in the tradition, they use another metaphor. They say, when a rope has burned, for a while, the ashes keep the shape of the cylindrical shape of the rope. And then the wind blows the ashes away. And so the residues of ignorance after the glimpse are similar to the apparent form of a rope, but which has lost its grip. You cannot use the rope to tie someone. So you are free from the rope. You may believe that you are still in fetters, but you are not. The sadhana, the spiritual path, there is a spiritual path after the glimpse, the purpose of which is to liberate the body-mind from the residues of ignorance. And we can, if we're inclined to do so, we can collaborate with this dissolution. And there is a yoga, if you will, there is a sadhana, a past enlightenment, if you will, or a past glimpse sadhana. And in India, they have a name for everything. The guru that takes you through this path is called the Karana Guru. The idea is to realign the way we feel, we perceive, with the universality of consciousness that has been revealed. Although I know I am not a person, or although I know this consciousness is universal, still there are habits to feel as a separate individual or to think as a separate individual. So these two realms where the residues are still imprinted needs to be cleansed, if you will. And we can cooperate to this process. On the realm of thoughts, it's it's accomplished through revisiting all the rational or pseudo-rational arguments that come to us, that deny the possibility for consciousness to be universal, such as the ones that were mentioned here. And a teacher can help you, can give you shortcuts, just as if you learn mathematics, a teacher can give you, oh, the problem you have has already been solved, and here is a solution. And then you say, oh, yes, shortcut. You cannot reinvent the wheel by yourself. You see, so sometimes it's interesting to take shortcuts. Now, the other place where these residues are on the level of feelings. It is this sense we have to be embodied, to be in this body as this body. This sense that the universe around me are not my body. And this sense, this feeling goes away over time. It would go away naturally, but we can facilitate, accelerate the process by doing some collaboration with this process.
Did you ever feel like almost like heartbreak, or all that love that there is, or do you ever feel heartbroken, or like as you say, feelings in the body? Doesn't a lot of that embracing everything kind of feel like a heartbreak, or do you have any? I guess it's maybe compassion. I don't know, but yeah, that's why I asked earlier, like, how do you feel in your body? I wonder, if you just feel full of love, or you feel full of heartbreak, or if you feel just neutral. I'm just curious.
There are many colors that the experience of our true nature can take. It's not one single color of love. It can be also color of joy, color of childlikeness, color of enthusiasm, color of beauty, color of intelligence. There are many colors. To focus on one single color would put the experience of our true nature in a straitjacket. We have to be open. God presents herself with different dresses at different moments. Sometimes it's a dress of love, and sometimes it's a dress of beauty, and sometimes it's a dress of humor, and it's always different.
Yeah, but maybe the general feeling, is it kind of like a content general feeling? Or?
Yes. Now, because I'm not seeing exactly what you are driving at. So for instance, if what you mean that my heart should be broken, that our heart should be broken, because when we watch the news, we see all these terrible things. You see, then good luck with being happy, because my heart gets broken also with the cows being slaughtered. My heart gets broken, If the reason sometimes our heart gets broken is because we believe we are mortal. And our ignorance, we see our fear. The death of others reminds us of the death of our body, of our limitations. And as a result, so that's not real compassion, because ultimately it's about me as a person. You see, so the real way to be compassionate is not to be afraid of our own death. And if we are not afraid of our own death, truly, we are not afraid of the death of others. You see? That's very important. As long as we are afraid of the death of others, or of our own death, we are missing the mark. You see? Then compassion is something different. If we are free from our own feeling, compassion means, etymologically, if you will, to be able to feel with the other. Etymologically, it's the same thing as sympathy. Sympathy is the Greek version, compassion is the Latin version, but it's the same thing. To feel together, to feel the same thing. To the extent that we are empty of our own feelings, we are able to resonate with other people's feelings through empathy, and to be able to feel the way other people feel. But the beauty is that if we are able to be free from our own feelings, we are also free from the other people's feeling when they come to us. And in fact, this benevolent indifference to this arising in us, through these mirroring neurons, if you will, of the feeling of others, has a magical impact on others because it gives them a way out. You know, if you visit a friend who is dying in the hospital, and if you do what many people do, oh, you'll be better, you'll be back home soon. The guy knows he's dying, you know, but you are afraid of your own death, you see. And you are giving him this BS. And he knows he's dying, and he knows you're bullshitting him, but do you think you're helping him? No. Obviously, no. It's fake compassion. Real compassion is you are there. You are not afraid of your own death. You are not afraid of his. That helps. This fearlessness communicates itself. You following me?
Yeah. Thank you.
It reminds me, there was a guy attending my teacher's teachings. He was giving an intensive near Paris every year. And every year, this same guy came, and he looks very miserable. You know, he had long hair, you know, black hair coming down, and looked like... And every time, he would ask the same question. Why is there misery in the world? And my teacher would give always the same answer. Look at yourself. Heal yourself before you want to heal the world. The only way to help the world is to help yourself. If you have psychological problems, okay, you're depressed, would you go to a therapist who is miserable? I mean, you go to the therapist and you say, oh, I want to kill myself, you know, life sucks. And the therapist says, yeah, you know, the thought comes to me. You see what I mean? I mean, if he cannot heal himself, what makes you so certain he can heal you?
Francis, right here.
No, sit, be comfortable.
Okay, I've seen so many teachers over the years, and you know, I just love your friend Rupert, and you know, there's Rupert, there's you, there's your Jean Klein, there's his teacher, and I'm sure at some point you all had a lot of questions to ask each other. And you know, we sit here. You always seem to do questions and answers, and as you say, not give speeches. But you know, I guess my question is about answering questions for ourselves rather than always being dependent on a teacher to ask. You know, the old thing about give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish. You feed him for a lifetime. And so I guess that's sort of the essence of my question is, how did it happen for you that you quit depending on your teacher to answer questions and you started to discover the answers within yourself?
Oh, I think I asked questions from my teacher for 2 years. And then it was clear. Usually the way, I must say that during these first 2 years, I asked a lot of questions. I remember one day, there was a talk in Switzerland in the summer, and I asked question after question after question for 1.5 hours. And at the end, I was a little ashamed. I told them, I'm sorry. And they said, no, we enjoyed it. Your questions were good questions. So anyway, I asked questions for 2 years, but then I had no more questions. So the way it works, and is first the teacher answers your question, but often he would also give me not just the answer to the question, but a little bit to be continued, to explore further. He would give me a little teaser, you know, so then the next question would come, so that the exploration would be as complete as possible. And then there was a second phase in which somehow I knew I had found the answer, I was correct, but I kind of wanted his confirmation. And that was also helpful because he would say, oh yes, absolutely. I say, yes, absolutely. And that would kind of seal the question. You see, it was a seal, and then the question would. I remember, I kept attending these retreats, and because there was other parts of the teaching that were not dealt with questions. But a few years later, in a retreat, I don't know what took me, I asked a question, and I don't know what, and he looked at me and with a smile, like, what are you doing, Francis? You know? And I asked a question. I don't remember at all his answer, and at the time we were recording on cassettes, and after that I went to listen to the cassette, and my question was so bland, and the answer was so bland, it was like boring stuff. So, yeah, to make a long story short, the idea from the vantage point of the teacher is to make the student as quickly as possible independent from asking questions that you can, because ultimately the answer is in you. My answer doesn't answer the question. My answer points towards the answer which is in you, and the confirmation, you get it within. And that's interesting. How do I get it within? But sometimes you hear something I say, and you say, yes, that's true. That's a confirmation you get from within. Yes, it's my experience. That's a confirmation. You see, it's that simple. Then if it is your experience, you can go back to it as much as you want.
Hi, Francis. So Rupert often talks about the metaphor of the self-aware screen, and I asked him a question about this, and he answered it, and I don't know if it really stuck, so I'm interested to see your opinion. And it could be...
I have to be careful what I say.
I understand it's not your metaphor, so feel free to use another one. But he describes the self-aware screen as awareness, and that the objects of awareness are not other than it, but they don't affect awareness. And when the screen is off, it doesn't matter because you're not aware of when you're not aware. So where that breaks down for me, or at least, I mean, this is a deficit of metaphors in general, but if you were asleep in front of me, if I was in deep sleep, or if I was in deep sleep, and you were next to me, and you were to wake me on my shoulder, from the point of view of that metaphor, it seems like an object on the screen is turning the screen on before the screen is on. And yeah, so what does this look like from the point of view of only one screen while there's an object waking another object up?
Say that again. I'm not getting it. If you are in deep sleep,
If I'm in deep sleep and you wake me up, using Rupert's metaphor, it appears to me that it would be an object on the screen of my awareness, turning it on before there was an object on the screen. And that doesn't seem to work.
I'm sorry, I'm stupid today.
And if you could use a different metaphor, that'd be fantastic.
No, but I'm not getting your argument. I didn't sleep well last night. So.
Neither did I. Perhaps I'll come have a conversation with you.
Or ask your question differently, without metaphor, just in plain English. You can do it in French also.
How is it that an object of awareness can bring awareness out of deep sleep?
Okay, you assume that awareness is in deep sleep?
I don't know.
Yeah. Your question makes this assumption that awareness is in deep sleep and is brought out of deep sleep. That's your question, right?
That would be the assumption, yes.
The answer is awareness is never in deep sleep. Deep sleep is in awareness.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for answering all these questions. In response to the gentleman's question about questions, you said you went through a process over a period of time. And I often wonder how much of it is the words and how much of it is just presence. Because often Ramana answered questions with simple silence and people got it. So how much of it is just resonance of being with the teacher and how much of it is the words? Because sometimes we go with words and words are, we want to show how smart we are to ourselves, how much progress we have made to ourselves. And that seems to be a futile exercise in pumping the ego up. So how much of it is just silence and presence? And how much of it is the words?
5% the words. 10% the sound of the voice. I have to go to 50%, and then the remaining 50% will be silence. So the authenticity that comes through body language, and then, yes, silence. Something I have no explanation for. But the gentleman who sits next to you knows. There was something strange. Whenever I would meet my teacher, in my case it's not, I would feel like the back of my head was expanding. No rational explanation for that. And it didn't matter. Sometimes I would come and see him. I had a question in the beginning. Sometimes I would come, remember coming in Paris, and I would come and I was visiting him and we didn't speak. I would just sit, we would meditate for 1 hour. Sometimes we would just have a casual conversation. No matter what, this strange phenomenon was taking place. So it was not connected to the words, to the absence of words, to something else. It was. So, there are more things on heaven and earth, Horatio, right, than in your philosophy. I have no explanations for anything, I guess. I don't explain things.
Thank you.
Hi there. My question is, if I say I imagine myself on a beach, on vacation, and I think, oh, that sounds pleasant, and then I book a vacation and I go to manifest what occurred in my imagination, doesn't that imply that I've imagined myself as a separate individual? And at what point, or rather, what's the use of imagination, and at what point should we not try to not imagine ourselves as separate beings?
Well, let me answer the question this way. Let's assume your car is dirty, and needs to be cleaned up, and you need also new tires. And you imagine taking your car to Costco to have the tires changed, or to some place, and to have the car washed. Does the fact that you project in your imagination all of these things happening to your car imply that you identify yourself with your car?
No.
Similarly, when you picture yourself, your body, going to some Caribbean and having a martini, and doesn't imply that you identify with your body. Your body is a vehicle.
I'm not sure, because it seems like there's a situation where you are imagining something that is on behalf of a separate entity.
If you believe that you are the body, yes, of course, yes. Then you're right.
So, are you saying that it's not about the act of imagining itself, but if the one that imagines believes that it is separate?
It's what you believe to be. It's about what you believe to be.
That answers my question.
If you believe to be something which is perceived, you're cooked.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Francis, and thank you for being here. My name is Jeremy. I would like to hear you speak a little bit about devotion, and if that, for instance, I mean, with some of my teachers, I have great devotion, and I'll be meditating or thinking strongly about them with sort of like my heart to their heart. And what I find is that there is a feeling of expansion and at the heart chakra and so on, that and generally I feel like I can answer questions better. So that I wondered if you would comment in relation to the topic that was just discussed a moment ago about the silence aspect of this, and whether that silence is really the transmission that may be going on between teacher and student. And therefore, you know, of course, implying too that a student doesn't necessarily need to be physically present with the teacher for the transmission.
It's a dicey thing to speak about the silence. It's better to let the silence speak. It's
If one is connected to one's teacher, that what I'm experiencing in my heart is really because I'm now connected to my teacher, and there's no difference between me and my teacher.
the connection to the teacher is similar to the connection to an infant to the mother. As long as the infant is dependent and cannot provide for his or her survival, you know, so the teacher is a spiritual mother in a sense. For some, the teacher is love for the absolute. That's the real nature of the teacher. The disciple is love for the teacher, which is love for the absolute. It's kind of but the squared love for love equals love. So the path is moving from the love for the love of the absolute to the love of the absolute. That's a bhakti path, that's a path of love. Somehow, we travel through all the paths. The path of knowledge, the path of love, the path of beauty, the path of humor, the path of celebration. At some point, all the paths converge. You cannot have love without beauty. You cannot have love without intelligence. We talk about the intelligence of the heart, you know, there is a form of understanding in love. And there is beauty in intelligence, etc. So all the paths merge. All these nouns, love, truth, beauty, they are qualities of the absolute. There is only the absolute.
Can you say something about the sometimes insidious relationship between thought and emotion, where emotion comes up and you start thinking about it, that amps up the emotion, and then it gets into a cyclical effect where the thought is feeding the emotion, and the emotion feeds the thought, and within a short time you've got yourself in some sort of tizzy, some sort of exaggerated state that you really don't need to be, but it's just one starts to feed on the other and it gets very exaggerated.
The thought that triggers negative emotions is always a thought to be a separate person, to be a separate entity, a separate consciousness. So that's what I was alluding to by saying that all of our psychological issues have one single root cause. So when we have entered this vicious circle, running around in circles, emotions means the body in motion, right? Emotions set the body into motion. When that happens, the train has left the station. You see, there is not, in Europe we have a thing that we can stop the train, but there is no stopping of the train. So you have to know that. We have to know that the body in motion, the emotion has to run its course up, it will stop at the next station. What we can do is stop feeding it, meaning stop boarding the train again at the next station when it stops. You see? And that is accomplished by kind of becoming aware that it is always the same pesky thought of being a separate entity that triggers the emotions. But when we are in this, on the train, it's not a good moment, in fact, to do self-inquiry. The good moment is when we are available, when we have no problem. Then we are interested. You see, said, this interest is very potent, very powerful, and it enables us to strengthen our conviction that we are not a separate consciousness. And then these episodes of thought that triggers the negative emotions, we come up less and less. We have to, in the beginning, we feel the emotion. It's easy to trace it back to a thought. For instance, he called me stupid. So I felt all this anger and I wanted to punch him in the face, right? So that's the emotion, the reaction to being called stupid. Right? So it started with a thought. How did he dare do that to me? So then, who is the me? You know, it was all about this me. So when I know, well, I'm this intelligence, you are this intelligence too, I don't feel stupid any longer. So he's free to think I am stupid, I couldn't care less. You see, that's very different. I'm not going to react and punch a guy in the face anymore. That if someone comes and tells me, you know what, there is no gravity. I mean, I see the guy is not levitating in front of me, so obviously he's sticking to the ground because of gravity, right? So I'm not going to get angry because he's fighting my belief that there is gravity. You see what I mean? It's a free country after all. If you want to believe this way, that's his problem. You see what I mean? So then our emotions get triggered less and less. What we have to know is to identify with clarity the troublemaker. The troublemaker is this belief to be a separate entity. So every time we indulge in the thought of me as a separate person, we need to have a warning sign that goes, alert, 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 because then this cute thought, very cute, then down the road triggers misery. So it's like borrowing money from your banker, buy this fancy car, and then you have to toil at the office extra hours to pay for it. So that's not good. So we have to identify the culprit, and then be careful every time it comes up and tries to sell us a fancy car.
Thank you. Francis, I have a question. This is in reference to there's a space where I'm not separate, which is not really a space, it's an empty place, that then arises into something I don't know, which is wonder, which then arises into an inquiry, which begins a relationship. And that relationship then manifests itself into something, objective something. And in that objective something, I get to have a relational story with it, and an emotional story with it. And that emotional story and that relational story, which is very much alive and very much dualistic, and I am and they are, and there's this incredible dance of love that happens in that, because it seems as if there's something missing. So I'm trying to fix it again. And that dance of love of trying to fix what's missing is not actually missing, but it's a beautiful dance. And then there's the opportunity when we both recognize that this dance is beautiful in its desire to unite, or angry at our inability to do so. And those seem to be the pattern of which I watch life unfold. And there was a point in time when I just went to be not separate in the quiet, beautiful serenity. And my wife was lucky enough to pull me out of it and said, no, join me again. And there I got pulled back into the beautiful dance. So that there now becomes not a difference between the non-separate self and the separate self. That becomes just the arising, or the void, or whatever it happens to be. But it basically seems as if there is no reason to define it at all anymore, but just to be amazed by its arising. And I ask that does that resonate with you as a truth, or can you give a comment to it?
It doesn't come to me as a question.
Yeah, I believe that I didn't deliver it as a question. I believe I probably ask it more as a confirmation of an
Yeah,
understanding.
but confirmation of what? You see what I mean? Confirmation of what? Of
Maybe just an experience.
but I don't know. I don't know what I have to confirm or not to confirm, you see. Sometimes people come and say, okay, I understand that. Is it? And I say, yes. Or I say, yes, but. Or I say, no. But in this case, you say that's my experience, and I say, yes, I have nothing to. Our experience confirms itself, you see what I mean? At every moment, I cannot say, regarding self-inquiry, there are two ways to approach self-inquiry, and one way is I have to do it because if I do it, I get enlightened or I get something. And the other way is like when we have a question, I am interested. You see, I'm interested in knowing what is all this about, what am I? You know. So it's a very different approach. So self-inquiry has to come from this interest, from this enthusiasm. So we shouldn't become dull by practicing self-inquiry or saying, oh, I'm miserable. If I practice self-inquiry, then I may not be miserable. No. If I'm miserable, first let's take a look, why am I miserable? That would be the first inquiry to start from. What is it that makes me miserable? Perhaps down the road I may discover I'm miserable because I believe to be a separate consciousness, and then that may lead to self-inquiry, but then that's a different thing. But then self-inquiry has to come to us spontaneously in the form of interest. That's the interest that took us here, you know. That's, we have to honor that in us, we have to acknowledge it, we have to give it space and time to grow. Like Jean Klein used to say, we should live with the question. Meaning, don't interrupt the question, don't trash the question, don't pull the question, let the question grow organically and take you organically to the answer. And the question of self-inquiry is what am I? And what am I mean, am I this body or am I rather this consciousness? And then the second step, okay, if I have come to the conclusion I'm this consciousness, then is this consciousness limited? Is it real? How do I know it is limited? You see, it's a more surgical investigation than to ask, what am I, what am I, what am I, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, what am I, what am I, what am I? You see, that's like, it doesn't lead anywhere. It has to be proactive, it has to be propelled with the energy of enthusiasm and interest to be fruitful. Okay, no more questions? Thank you.